Often appearing as Greenleaf the Clown, to promote her messages, she has some stories to tell.
I want to just begin with just some snippets of, hey Sola, of just from my, I'm just going to zip through because it's a few minutes.
3 minutes.
Okay.
And you get the gong.
So in high school, I was involved in the civil rights movement where I went on a weekly picket line at Woolworths working with CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. 2 of us were young people and the rest were Quakers and probably some WILPFers and Unitarians and some Jews and Christians and Catholics at the Santa Monica Woolworths. And I learned about that CORE because I went to a camp called Brotherhood USA, where Kathy went to and others, and it was also called Anytown. And so I was among, there's a picture of me when I'm 16, in the front row with Vicki Alexander, who became one of the first African-American doctors in the LA area, young woman becoming, so that's that one. And then I got on a blacklist in my high school because all of the girls who attended that camp were considered undesirable to go out with if you were a young man. And that's why so many men wanted to go out with us. So, I was a very serious activist during the Vietnam War. And then I decided to get into clowning and mime. And when I was in Michigan studying mime and just trying to figure out how can I do music and mime and clowning and political activism at once, some of my friends at Grand Rapids, it was called Grand Valley State College, Thomas Jefferson College, invited me to sing at a big anti-nuclear rally. And we didn't have Joan Baez there, so they asked Phyllis Greenleaf to do it. So the picture of me singing in front of 4,000 people, and I've never done that before. And I wrote a funny song about nuclear. That wasn't nuclear weapons. This was about nuclear power. Earlier, when I was younger, I was doing a lot with nuclear weapons. And speaking of nuclear weapons, we're going to jump up now to the 80s. I was in this really great picket line. And I was in the legal picket line as Greenleaf the Clown, clowning as the musicians were playing. Earlier in the morning, many women had blockaded this conference of corporate leaders meeting with Pentagon leaders, because their whole thing was about systems and technologies and first strike weapons. So I got illegally arrested. I don't know where the ACLU was at that moment, but I saw the police. It was cold, it was raining, and they came and they arrested all the musicians first. Strolling musicians. And I ran up to the police, the sergeant, and I said, "Sir, these are my friends. I'm Greenleaf the Clown." And so he grabbed me and he said, "You're going too, baby," and threw me into the paddy wagon. And I was completely relieved to be in the paddy wagon because it was warm and dry, and I was freezing and wet. And so then I got to go to court, and they had me in a cell with the women who were arrested in the morning because they illegally blockaded. And then they were letting the women out because they'd been processed, and I was going to be left in the cell all by myself in Boston. That didn't feel safe to me, so I stood in the doorway as Greenleaf the Clown blocking. I wouldn't let them close it. I said, "No, Greenleaf the Clown cannot be left alone." And I was trying to be very frolicky with the police. "You cannot leave me alone. I'm Greenleaf the Clown." And they just didn't know what to do with me because I didn't think they didn't want to shove me because I was clown. Green wig, white face, friendly, you know. And so I said, I need to be with people. I love people. I'm Greenleaf the Clown. And I just kept saying how much I love people. And one policeman looked at the other and said, "Let her go. Follow those women." So in the courthouse, this is a picture of me in the courthouse. When I walked in, the judge sort of looked at me and I said, "Your Honor, I'm your court jester for the day." So he let me kind of play a little bit until I was a little too vociferous or whatever. And then the picture, for those in the front row, take a quick look. They had 2 sergeant of arms standing next to me, and I was being quiet because I was making too much noise. And the last one I'll show you, although I've done things recently too. But I have found that doing it as a clown, you get to be a little more outrageous and a little more noisy, but also non-threatening, because I can go up to a police officer, as I'm doing during the Seneca Women's Peace Encampment, which was in the 1983, Seneca Falls, New York.
Yes.
And Ellen Shube, you've probably heard of a photographer from Boston, she said, Phyllis, we need a clown, because a lot of the people in that area have become anti our peace encampment for various prejudices relating to homophobia. Really not related, because this was again about first strike weapons. So I spent 8 hours clowning with the state troopers and with the local bystanders. And at the end, I was sweaty and hot, but it was a wonderful day because there were a lot of people, a lot of male supporters of the Women's Peace Encampment. At the end, I went up to one of these officers who let me put a flower in his lapel. And it was ending in a kind of down way. Everybody was tired. And I said to him, if this were the end of my demonstration, we'd have a great big potluck. We'd have a square dance. We'd have food, and everybody would eat. And we would talk to the people who did disagree with us. And we would make friends, and we wouldn't be treating each other badly. And I was sort of saying this to this policeman, all in armor. He was wearing the tear gas stuff and everything. And he looked at me and he said, I'll come to your demonstration. So what I'd like to do is continue to figure out ways to have a good time creating safety and peace and justice and dealing with climate change in a way that is both informative and fun.
Teach Your Children Well has been a popular song for decades. And Gabby Litsky took it to heart, and with her preschool curriculum, founding Santa Cruz Peace Camp and leading workshops, she's helping us start from the bottom up. And we know how important that is. Gabby, would you like to come talk a little?
Hi, thanks for having me. Just like Phyllis, I was listening to my life repeating. Many of us started with activist parents, and my parents were no different. My dad was a trade unionist. My mom, early on, her brother went and fought in Spain, and the family was anti-fascist. And so I came from leftist leanings, proud to be a red diaper baby. Thank you very much. And so I grew up with that feeling of fairness and justice and working for peace in the world. And just like Phyllis, it followed from the civil rights movement on into anti-war, into anti-Vietnam, into the Abalone Alliance, which was the group that was trying to stop Diablo before Diablo actually got constructed and happened. And working all through there, when I moved to Colorado, it was Rocky Flats. And so all of that sort of followed me. I was involved. But when I got here to Santa Cruz about 30 years ago, my mom was involved with WILPF. And I became involved with WILPF. And I found that WILPF was not only working against many things, because we're out protesting and writing letters and being against a lot of things a lot of the time, but WILPF is also working for rights, for education, for community housing, all kinds of for things. And my passion happened when actually I was not the start of Jane Addams Peace Camp. It was Marilyn Lucier, who's sitting in the back over there. And I only worked with her for teaching peace and being an early childhood educator. That's something we do all the time in our classrooms. We encourage kids not to whack each other, but to use your words. We teach kids to cooperate with each other. And so the logical extension was Peace Camp for a little bit older kids and giving them an opportunity to learn those skills. So we've been doing it for almost 20 years here in this county. We also collaborate with other people all over the state and actually all over the country that are doing similar things. And right now I'm in the process of revamping a Peace Camp manual that will include a lot of this philosophy. So I'm going to just read you a little bit about what we think is important to work with kids on. At Peace Camp, children learn tools to create a safer world. Safety and respect for self, others, and the environment are explored and practiced through the development of concepts and skills in conflict management and community building, implemented with an anti-bias focus. Time and awareness of children's special concerns and unique qualities allow each individual to enhance the community. The issues which arise from camp community itself are developed and integrated into the program. We weave together activities that promote knowledge, attitudes, and skills to stimulate advocating for a more peaceful world. And then we teach all kinds of peacemaking concepts. We teach about community building and giving children opportunities to practice their peacemaking skills, to be empowered and to take action. And this is very important, and I know dear to the heart of WILPF, to take action, social action, to create a peaceful world. Because that's the logical extension, is activism. So that's what I'm involved in. Phyllis actually came to teach a workshop at Peace Camp a few years ago, and she taught how a little bit of clowning can intervene and take a difficult situation and make it easier when you make people laugh. So that's me. Thanks.
Also in our community, we have Boys and Girls Club. We have Beach Flats Community Center. We have parks. We have what Jane Addams started with was when she co-founded Hull House. And Jane Addams is a co-founder of WILPF, so that we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of that co-founding. She started being a settlement in the worst neighborhoods in Chicago. And she learned what does the community need. And a lot of it was that the kids were left at home because the parents had to go work. They had very dangerous situations. They had no parks, they had no play, they had no arts, they had none of the things. And so we can see that in our children's curriculums, how integral that is. The next person that I'd like to bring up is someone who is working with the issue of what happens if our kids don't feel wonderful in society, if they don't feel included, if their learning differences or their genetic issues or whatever is going on with them makes them feel uncomfortable and they end up in the sight of the police. So Willow.
I'm going to read. For years I visited weekly Carmen Valentin, who was arrested in 1980 and charged with seditious conspiracy against U.S. rule over Puerto Rico. In 1990, Nelson Mandela, charged with sedition against apartheid South Africa, was freed from prison. And that weekend, Carmen said, "One day, that will be us walking out the prison gates." In 1999, 11 Puerto Rican political prisoners were granted executive clemency. I remember this when campaigns seemed difficult or impossible to win. Now it's time to free the last Puerto Rican political prisoner, Oscar Lopez Rivera, imprisoned 34 years on May 30th. In 2011, prisoners made human rights demands for California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to end the torture of long-term solitary confinement and abusive conditions. Thousands went on peaceful hunger strikes then and again in 2012. In August 2012, they enacted the Agreement to End Race-Based Hostilities, a historic document that we all can learn from, in lockups and communities. And they called for the over $12 billion budget, annual CDCR budget, to be used for education, social programs, and resources for people locked down and the people of California. The agreement helped over 30,000 prisoners go on hunger strike in July 2013, the largest hunger strike in the history of the world. They won international condemnation of the torture. In November 2013, California prisoners proposed supporters rally in statewide coordinated actions 1 day a month to demand their rights. These actions started on March 23rd, 2015, and happen on the 23rd of every month for the 23 and more hours a day that over 12,000 Californians are locked alone in concrete and steel cells the size of a bathroom without fresh air or sunlight for years and decades on end. The actions are growing throughout California and nationally and internationally. WILPF Santa Cruz, please co-sponsor or endorse statewide coordinated actions to end solitary confinement and join the actions on the 23rd of each month. Saturday, May 23rd will be the next one at 11:30 at the entrance to the wharf. I'm also working on a petition to all governments, a living wage for mothers and other caregivers. Caring for others is the foundation of every society, yet this work, done mostly by women, is devalued and underfunded. We demand that every worker be paid a living wage, including mothers and other caregivers, and international budgets redirect financial support and resources to mothers and other caregivers. In 1995, the Global Women's Strike and International Women Count Network, supported by 1,200 NGOs worldwide, won the Beijing UN Women's Conference resolution that governments place an economic value on unwaged work and include it in GDPs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics began time-use surveys. Now it's time to get that money. WILPF Santa Cruz has endorsed. If you can ask your organizations, please sign up with me so that we can send you the petition to take to your org. Thank you.
So Ruth is 98. She's been a long time WILPF member. She's also written about in a book that I'm sorry is in the glass case that is fabulous. Is Ruth Gunn Mota's book. There we go. Heads, Hearts, and Handcuffs, and you can get it at Bookshop Santa Cruz. Fabulous. And a lot of the women in here aren't with us anymore, and they got stories. Okay, now let's hear some good ones.
Do anything? What?
Huh? I was thinking you were going to tap dance. No, you get 3
Say
minutes.
thank you.
Just tell us something from your life that everybody should know.
Well, I've
That's
traveled
hard.
the world over, and I've been to mostly Central America. And at one time, there were so many young people were being arrested and disappeared. And so I made a point of being in Central America and getting pictures of the disappeared youngsters and then joining their family, and of course being an activist I had to go there and hold the picture up and yell about what was going on. And so I was holding the pictures because when you're an activist you join in, you all know that, most of you are activists. And I looked up, I'm holding the picture, and where are the kids? And I looked up and there's guns looking right at me. And I thought, well, I won't say what I thought. No bad words in the crowd. Anyway, the guns didn't bother me one single bit.
How many times have you been arrested?
About 11, 12.
The question was, how many times has she been arrested? And she said 11 or 12.
Tell us about Father Bourgeois,
Oh, I didn't hear, honey.
SOA. Father Bourgeois, School of the Americas.
Oh, in Georgia.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fantastic. That was so much fun. And he was Father,
Bourgeois.
thank you. Stick around. Father Bourgeois was a personal friend, and he had stayed at my house. So that was a real pleasure to be with him. And it was quite a time, believe me. Well, all of my times were interesting, so I won't tell you anymore.
Lois has a long activist career, which was mostly enacted side by side with her professor, mayor, and fireball husband, Bert Muley. Lois has consistently supported the enemy in Nicaragua by co-founding TresAmericas.org with material aid, fair trade, coffee sales, and collectives. She's been with Cuba, Pastors for Peace, and wherever else the opportunity arose. She also trained me in creative conflict for children in the 1980s, and I'm planning to use that in El Salvador. I now have a Spanish version on my next visit, so please welcome Lois.
Thank you. Is this correct?
Yep, great.
Since I've had,
Do you want to just put it here? Let's do this.
that's a good idea.
Close as you can.
Since I've had my stroke, I falter in my words occasionally, so I'm reading. And it says, most of the time, Bert and I traveled together in the hopes that our stories would move in synchronization. And so we had been perched on the back of a Russian truck going with another group of people who were tourists, ourselves included, people who were interested in the land giveaway and of the Sandinista and drivers, who were interested in the land giveaway and the Sandinistas and the drivers. Nicaragua was suffering from the Reagan threat of the Contra War. Not everyone was in agreement with the Sandinistas, and the Contra War was being waged by Nicaraguans from the north of the country who had issues with the way the Sandinistas were trying to run the country. We were told by one of the refugees at the Palmarola refugee camp in Honduras, who was talking about the dangers of the Sandinistas and the way their families had been treated. The young girls are being taken away from their families, claimed this man. I gasped that that was a terrible thing to do. You mean the girls are stolen from their homes? Well, not that, but they did give dances for the girls to go to, said the first man. And they did send them to school, chimed in a second man who joined in the desecration of his family life. But here we were in the southern part of the country and fairly safe in a caravan of several cars. The Russian truck was sturdy, all but the brakes. The system to control the brakes was to toss a stick of wood under one of the wheels at the appropriate point on a hill so that the braking motion would be controlled for the moment. Then after both wheels had run over the truck, the assistant would run to the woods and then to the front of the truck and repeat the process. I was watching this process and felt it was satisfactorily successful in keeping the truck at a pretty steady pace. The road was fairly narrow, with the usual ruts in it. All of a sudden, we reached the lower point of the valley, but instead of making a run for the hills that continued up the hill and our truck stopped. We couldn't figure out what had happened, but were apprehensive about being stopped. We couldn't figure, we looked ahead and didn't see anything unusual. Could it be that the Russian truck had just decided to give up? We then realized that there was a troop train that was inching toward us. Our eyes were fastened on the scene in front of us, trying to decide if there was enough room for the trucks to pass each other. The trucks were moving in an unusual pattern as they worked their way down the hill toward us. What we didn't realize is our eyes were riveted toward the front of the vehicle that was from the back of the truck. Another vehicle was approaching. Another bus. This bus was not entirely in control of the driver, and assistant driver helped to control the brakes again by using a log to throw under the wheels of the bus, which helped slow the bus. Nicaraguan buses were usually loaded with all manner of produce, livestock, as well as people. The people who stood in the front of the bus were starting to laugh at our predicament. When we saw what was about to happen, like the proverbial bug in a rug, Bert yelled out, "Bail!" Bail we did. The vehicles started to pass each other. We saw that one of the troop buses had been trying to restart using a high gear and compression, and they were successful in finally doing so. The truck that we had been on started on its way, minus quite a few passengers. The bus that was coming from up behind slowed down, and with the aid of its unusual brakes to allow our bus to continue on its way, while all the scattered passengers ran to catch up, and we were on our way again. You want to know what it's like to run a revolution? This was the Nicaraguan Revolution, and they worked in every possible way that they could in order to win their revolution, which they did.
Pat Arnold, it got you, huh? The bug got you.
From the medical foundation, and they said I have pneumonia. I'm on the ground to pick up the prescription, so I thought I'd stop by and say.
This is the amazing woman, this is why, like in between the diagnosis and the treatment, she's gonna do some activism. So, tell us.
Just a few minutes. Okay, when I was
So beautiful.
went down to Washington DC with a delegation from the United Nations Association. Jesse Helms was the head of the foreign relations, and we had a meeting scheduled with him and also with Joe Biden. And first we went to Joe Biden's office, and it was this little tiny square office there, and he was kind of discouraged, and it was a very discouraging time. And then we went over to Jesse Helms' office, and I noticed that there was a bathroom right next to it. So I said, "What is that?" And so I'm famous for pissing on Jesse Helms' office.
All right, the next person I want to bring up is connected with this Central American theme. And by the way, I was also in Nicaragua, and everything was held together with duct tape. And I'm thinking, these are our mortal enemies. And I was arguing with some Marine on the bus about, you think we're in danger? These people can't even stay awake on the bus, you know, I mean, everything is so poor there. And then I do have a friend in Costa Rica who got paid to run around in the woods. He didn't shoot anybody, he just got paid. So the next person, Yolanda, because Yolanda is from Chile, where you were talking about the disappeared, people disappeared, and she's seen a lot, and her profile is not quite complete because she was running around teaching positive discipline in Chile and Peru, and she teaches also in Live Oak. And I was lucky enough to begin learning Spanish with her pioneering high-intensity language training, HILT, in the 80s. It was all TPR, and Yolanda also helps adults find more inner peace with co-counseling. So Yolanda, do you want to come up and tell us a little bit?
No, in Spanish. This is a surprise. I was not thinking that I would come to talk with you, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that all this wisdom and all this experience from so many wonderful women and men allies here. Honored to be in the world right here with friends that I have known for many years, like Lois Muley. Well, the dress from El Salvador, actually. And I got this dress many years ago when it was a conference of campesinas leaders, countryside women. And I went there, and it was very useful, a lot of learning. I went with Pat Kane. I don't know if some people know Pat Kane. Yeah. Okay, then I have 1 minute. Any questions? I work right now. I'm retired from the high intensity language program that I led for many years, and was wonderful. It was amazing for me to meet there so many wonderful people like you, Bill Kane, that was last night at his house in a big benefit for Mexico. And I was invited by Elizabeth Schilling to come and teach Spanish here in Live Oak. And because I use a lot of music, children music, Elizabeth Schilling said, could you teach a parenting class in Spanish? And I said, I would love to. I have the credential. Then I'm doing that with Latin American mothers. The class is in Spanish, and I'm very lucky that this time the Community Bridges year report has one of my mothers at the, yeah, it's wonderful, this Salvadorian woman, and her baby, who is my grandson from my heart. I have many grandchildren from my heart. Then they call me abuelita. Yeah, and there is another baby there. So my activism, I was in Chile when I got the email from Paula saying, send something about you, but I didn't have access to internet. Then I said, okay, they will figure it out. Then, yeah, it's incomplete, my curriculum there. But thank you very much, Paula, for this opportunity.
Several people in this room have started organizations that have, and are directors of organizations that their activism really spreads. So, Maria Elena, would you like to speak next? Okay, so, Maria Elena's the executive director of CAB, and she has this infectious energy for public service, and she'll likely get you signed up for something before you leave. CAB itself was started 50 years ago in the war on poverty, another war, we have a lot of wars. And it has 6 programs assisting over 9,000 low-income people with emergency, sustaining, and self-sufficiency services, and additional 7,000 requests. So it's quite a hub of action. So, thank you so much.
Hi, buenas tardes, good afternoon. I'm Maria Elena de la Garza, and as Paula said, you know, I have been at Community Action Board now for a year and a half, almost exactly. So I'm new to the agency, kind of, and I am not new to the community. I'm born and raised in Watsonville, and so it's a thrill to be here today to see and meet some of the faces that I've only met through internet and email. You know, in thinking about activism and what that means and what it is and what's the history, and you know, CAB of course has been a community action agency, and this year we celebrate 50 years, as Paula said. 50 years, yes! And I will tell you that it is still energy, filled with energy, filled with passion, filled with commitment, filled with people like Catherine and Jane Doyle and folks from this organization that supports community action. And we couldn't do what we do without people like you in the community. And in thinking about activism in my personal life, I will tell you that, you know, I don't consider myself an activist, although I feel it in my heart. And I think my mother would have never considered herself an activist. And yet, absolutely, she was an activist. And that's where I got it, right? That's where we learn. So when my mom was in her early 20s and she migrated to the United States because her mother had passed away in childbirth of her younger sister, and my mom was the oldest and needed to help take care of the family. She came by herself to the United States to work to then be able to support her family. And I think, my God, what did I learn with that story? It's about being courageous and coming to a country that you don't know the language and you don't understand, but you know that you need to do something to help your family. And when she became a widow, when I was 8 and she was 40, and she had 2 younger daughters, my sister and I, or young kids, my sister and I, and she had a business to move forward. We opened one of the first Mexican restaurants in Watsonville, next to the old City Hall. And when she became a widow and she didn't speak English and she didn't know how to drive, CAB had a program to teach women how to drive in Spanish. And she would go to the classes after working all day at the restaurant, and she would cart my sister and I, and we would sit in the back of the room and learn. How wonderful that CAB was around back then. So she taught me, you push through the barriers. And you do what you got to do to take care of your family and your community. And thank God for CAB that it was there. Yeah. And in the 70s, those of you might remember the strikes in Watsonville when the cannery workers were fighting for equal rights and equal pay and benefits. My mom didn't go to the picket lines, and she didn't make signs, and she didn't go and protest. But you know what she did? She made hundreds of burritos, and she sent it to the strikers. And other people wouldn't call that activism, but I certainly do. And you know, lastly, when my mom was 70, I had the honor and the privilege to take care of her. I was her caretaker when she retired and became ill and was tired of working 365 days a year in the kitchen in the restaurant. She would sit at the kitchen table and she had her rosary, her rosario, and she would pray every single morning. And she would pray for us, and she would pray for the community, and she would pray for her friends. And the lesson in activism there is that she taught me that love and faith could change the world. And I thought about that, and I think about it now, and I know it's my turn. And so with that, those are my stories of activism, and I'm very blessed. And thank you for letting me be here today.
So, Claudia Vestal, early childhood education, Santa Cruz school board. Who does that? Ouch. And she also was my children's preschool teacher, and she started them outright. So Claudia.
Well, I'm really honored to be here and speak to this group in particular. I never set out to be an activist. I always just did the next thing. And so I was working in a child care center and unhappy with some of the things that I saw happening there. So the next thing was opening my own family child care home where everyone was welcome and respected, and I didn't kick children out for challenging behaviors. And then the next thing was coordinating a network of family child care providers who provide care for low-income students who have children under age 5. And the network has providers all over the county. It's a state subsidy program. And we have a lot of success. These, most of them young single moms, earn their degrees and their certificates, and they're able to then support their whole families. And I think it's because they're nurtured by the family child care home. She doesn't just nurture the child, but also the parent student. For the providers, it's good for them too, because they're often very isolated being in homes. So coming together for professional development and support, they can help each other. And it was during one of these meetings that some of the providers were talking about a licensing analyst that was really disrespectful and rude to them, and they were afraid of her. And I'll tell you one of the stories. It was Gloria. Gloria's first language was Spanish. She lives in Watsonville, has a 2-story house. The bottom story is her daycare, and the top story is for her family. The licensing analyst insisted on going upstairs. Even though there was a gate across, no child goes upstairs, insisted on going upstairs alone because she couldn't leave the children. And she could hear doors opening and closing, and it really made her upset. And when the analyst came down, she said, "What were you looking for?" And she said, "You people hide illegals."
Oh my gosh.
And stories like that. And then the providers who were English first language had a completely different experience with this analyst. She was very respectful and cheery and didn't even ask to go into areas that were off limits to children. So I belong to a group of, or I go to meetings with other directors who coordinate networks of family child care providers. And I told the story, just like Head Start and Migrant Head Start. And they said they'd heard about this analyst, but they didn't have a comparison because they didn't have programs in the northern county, I guess. But they also had stories. And it's scary because if a provider gets a Class A violation, she can't have subsidized children anymore. And most of the programs in Watsonville have only subsidized children. So we documented our stories. We sent them to the Child Care Ombudsman in Sacramento. And she came out and interviewed the providers, said we had a case. So the next thing was a hearing and talking these providers into testifying, which is really, really scary. Scary for all of us, but especially scary to some people who see this as their livelihood. One of the stories of a provider who was contracted with Migrant Head Start. She lives across from Watsonville High School, and she said when the analyst came, somebody, probably a student, had tossed a fast food bag over her fence, and the analyst wrote her up for having garbage strewn all over her facility. And she got a Class A violation, and she was no longer in business. I mean, those kind of stories. So, we won. We have a new analyst. But the best thing is that these providers are now able to say, "I don't know that regulation, can you show it to me?" They've been empowered. And I think, to me that means more than anything. The next thing for me, parents were asking about schools after preschool and worried, and I really believe in public education, so I ran for school board and became a policymaker. Keep those class sizes small, remember the developmentally appropriateness. It's a struggle, but I'm there anyway. And I joined the wellness committee. At that time, when I joined, the food program was only serving food for the only children who took advantage of it were the children who had free lunches. And the food was pre-prepared. It was only warmed at the school, so it was not appetizing, not fresh, and not for these children who needed nutrition. It was not good. So we changed the policies, went back to scratch cooking, buying fruits and vegetables from a 100-mile radius of our district, really changed things around, started programs like like breakfast for all, so that any child can go to school in the morning, have breakfast before they start school. No child should be hungry, and it's a wholesome breakfast. So, you know, I think these are just small things, but I think if we all just do the next thing, look around, we can make a difference.
Paul asked me if I would tell a story about my work with homeless people, which I've also done a lot of, but I'm going to choose today the peace movement, because I can do it more quickly. And two little vignettes that were teaching moments for me when I was asked to challenge my own assumptions and beliefs. We were on the corner, June 2003. Shock and awe had started in March, the annihilation of Iraq. And we were getting a lot of flack from people passing by. This was Ocean and Water. We had a weekly Friday Peace Vigil. At that point, there were still probably about 200 people showing up every Friday. We occupied all four corners. We were getting a lot of fingers. I always say that two fingers are more powerful than one. We were getting a lot of traitors. Go back, you know, communists, get a job, leave the country if you don't like it. We were getting a lot of that. And I was standing there, and I really like to try to make eye contact with the people driving by, because I'm there to reach out. And this car pulled up, hit the red light, much older couple, very late model American car, very conservative dress. The man is holding the steering wheel, almost shaking, looking straight ahead. His, what I assume, wife in the passenger seat, looking straight ahead, looking down. And I'm just, peace symbol, trying to look into their eyes. And all of a sudden, the woman turns and looks at me and goes, Talk about brave, right? Talk about brave. Light changed and on they went. And then about 6 months later, and we're down to about 50 people now each Friday, the chatter's getting a little more positive toward us, not a whole lot. You know, there's a lot of fear in those days about stepping out of line, not towing the line of the Bush regime. And this brand new American truck pulls up and hits the red light. Big Ford truck, diesel, extended cab, the whole works, and two younger men in the two seats who look obviously to me like construction workers. And I'm like, uh-oh. It just felt dicey. They're looking at me, and I'm peace symbol looking in their eyes. And one of them rolled down the passenger side window, and he leaned out, and he looked at our signs, and he said to me, you know, I would rather walk than kill somebody for oil. So I want to thank those people who challenged my assumptions. And I want to thank Paula for doing this again. It's been awesome, and she has inspired me back to a fantasy I've had about being an older activist, of writing a book called Stories from the Good Cause Trail. And maybe someday I'll get there. Thank you all.
Okay, I'm Mary Boone from Kentucky, 7 generations from Daniel Boone. I was the daughter of a moonshiner. That's the way that our family survived during the Depression. And when I was in school in Kentucky, I was told by the nuns that you're supposed to help other people and be concerned about the poor and things like that, but also don't join a union. It's a sin to join a union. And a few other, lots of other things that they said were sins. And so at the beginning I was concerned about not going to hell, so I was trying to be a good girl. And then by the time I got into college, the summer of '63, I went from Kentucky to Lake George, New York with some friends. We were going to waitress all summer, and then I was going to be able to help pay for my tuition. So I was going from the south to the north, where the nice Yankees were supposed to be a lot nicer. And I had 4 jobs that summer as a waitress, my first job as a waitress, and I got fired 4 times as a waitress. And the very last time that I got fired, I was fired by this very nice lady, one of the best restaurants I worked for, because a black Negro back then, couple came into the restaurant, very middle class, and the person that owned it said, "I'm not prejudiced, but," which I've heard many times since then, but other people will be upset, so maybe just ignore them and they'll go away. And I thought, well, that's not right. That's not what Jesus would do. And so I went and got all these hors d'oeuvres and everything. It was very nice to them and gave them a fine service and extra wine and things like that. And so after, they gave me a big tip and smiled and a lot. And then after they left and the restaurant closed, then I was informed that I was not needed to come back tomorrow morning and work anymore. So I barely had enough money. I mean, it blew my mind that, I mean, here it is, I'm getting fired in New York, which was supposed to be so much better than Kentucky, for not being prejudiced. And then Kentucky, I'd never seen a lot of bad stuff. I didn't know the Britons though. Let's see, so I got fired then. And then I came back home and then I finished college. And I was very concerned about the war. I was concerned about, gee, that's really not fair to get fired. Maybe unions aren't really so bad after all. There's a problem about being a woman and we're treated different than men and all these types of things. So I decided rather than stay here and feel like I'm living in sin, I'm going to go out to California in '68. So I came to California. And one of the first things I did was get involved with unions, which I've been involved with since then. And let's see, in '89, that's when the Pittston strike happened. It was the strike of the coal miners in, I think they were in Virginia or West Virginia, and then there were a lot of miners, of course, in Kentucky. So I decided to go with a brigade from California to that area, Appalachia, and support the strike. And we were there for about a week, and it was the most wonderful week I ever had in my life. There were people from all over the world that were coming, actually, and like it was so organized, and like if a busload of people from New York or Arizona or any place else would come, we'd all get out our pots and pans and bang them and then sing Solidarity Forever. And it was really wonderful, and I met a group of women that had taken over a mine. They're called the Daughters of Mother Jones. And they had taken over some of the mines because if they took over the mine, then the owners wouldn't be able to come in with scabs. And so they had all these women who had sat in chairs, or somehow they managed to sit in the opening of the mine with rifles in their laps. And they invited me to join them. They'd already, I didn't go sit there with a rifle or anything, but because that part was over. But anyway, they were the ones that I thought, wow, you talk about women's lib. I mean, these damn women, you know, they've got permanents, and some of them had fingernails, and, you know, they weren't as educated about history as the rest of us, but they had, I started to say, they had balls. They had ovaries. I thought women's lib is about being people like this, to be able, because the fight was over, they were losing their health plans, and a lot of these guys, as you know, got black lung, and you saw them all sitting there, and they didn't have a health plan anymore. And you thought, this is crazy. Everybody's going to try to take care of somebody dying, and you can't even go to a doctor, as if it's easy to get to a doctor in the hills of Kentucky or West Virginia. So anyway, when I was there, of course, one of the leaders in the miners was Mother Jones, and there was somebody there that I knew about the history of Mother Jones, and there was somebody there who looked like Mother Jones, and she gave a great speech, and I talked to her and asked her a lot of questions, and then she invited me to join the Daughters of Mother Jones, and that was the time when, like, the Kentucky Berry and the California Berry became one. That's why I love that whole week, because I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I felt like I was connected. The strongest from the South, the strongest from California came together. And as Mother Jones says, fight like hell for the living.
Well, I have to condense a great deal of really wonderful activism.
There's a list of it over there.
But I'm just going to tell you one little story. And that is my first arrest. I've been arrested almost as many times as my friend Ruthie, but not quite as many, and not as many different places around the world. But the first time I have been a part of a group in the Palo Alto area called Arachne. We were an affinity group and part of a big cluster of anti-nuclear people. And we were very active, all people of all ages. And we at one point, we were picketing at Lockheed in Sunnyvale. And they had, you know what Lockheed does. So we were just passing out information to the workers early in the morning as they came to work. And we crossed a line somewhere where we weren't supposed to be. So a bunch of us were arrested. And as it happened, I had been working as a psychiatric social worker counselor at the women's jail in Milpitas for a year and a half. And they put me in that jail. So I had left there not long before, but I still knew many of the inmates and all of the guards, and they were all so happy to see me. It was like old home week. So I wanted to say that I just read in my email yesterday that those 4 wonderful old people from Plowshares who keep breaking into nuclear plants and pounding on nuclear warheads have been released by a judge, and they're all home again.
Okay, I want to let Marcia just finish up. I want everybody, let's give everyone a round of applause for those people who spoke. And Marcia's just going to give us the last tidbit.
Really tidbit, and that is that we have honored the past this year, yes, with all these wonderful events that we've had in the library. And now it's time to transition into what are we really about in the coming year and in the next century of WILPF. And therefore, any of you who are interested in participating in that discussion should come on June 13th to this place in the afternoon. We will be having a re-envisioning and annual meeting session, and we want everybody's voice. So you're welcome to participate, and please do. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful.